Hi, I'm Randy Nesse from the Arizona State University Center for Evolutionary Medicine. Our special guest today is Sudhir Kumar, who was at ASU for 16 years before taking off for Temple. He's one of the world's leading people in evolutionary medicine, has developed new methods for using genetic data to trace phylogenies in ways that turn out to be very, very useful for understanding human disease. Sudhir, so glad you're here today.
Thank you.
Before we go into what you're doing now, I want to know if you got into genetics when you were 8 years old.
No, it was a bit later.
A bit later.
Yeah, I got into genetics when I went to college. So I went to college for engineering, and the college I went to gave you an opportunity to do double degrees. One in biology or sciences, I took biology, and one in engineering, which is electronics and electrical engineering. So for 5.5 years, I actually worked in both biology and engineering. And during this time, I studied genetics, and I became very interested in programming, like engineering
So
problem
your engineering
solving.
background is so interesting because so many of the very best people in evolution start off, John Maynard Smith, for instance, they start off in engineering and they start thinking in terms of design and function before they go on to do other things. It sounds like you have that background.
Yes, so many biologists who are in evolutionary biology are often naturalists.
Right.
They start observing nature. And many other people like me, like you mentioned, John Maynard Smith, or even physicists and chemists, they come in from a more mathematical angle, more problem-solving angle.
But you become much more of a neutralist than a naturalist.
Yes, I am a more of a neutralist when it comes to form and function than natural selection, especially for adaptation only.
So that turns out to be very useful for your methods. Can you tell us what that means to be a neutralist?
So the way humans are is that we always make observations, and we immediately think, oh, this must be there for a reason.
Right.
And this is because I think it is useful to think, why would we have it? And essentially, many characteristics, traits we have are actually very useful. Without them, we'll be hampered. But other traits are either vestigial organs or not as useful, or in terms of phenotypic effect, they may actually have no important function, even though they might look good or they might be there with all of us.
So you're kind of explaining what I consider to be the biggest mistake in evolutionary medicine. My students continually want to say the evolutionary function of breast cancer is, or an evolutionary function of schizophrenia is, or the genes for schizophrenia. It's very hard to get them to stop doing that.
That's right. So most people think evolution is a force, and they think evolutionary force is making things happen. But in reality, evolution is the outcome of variation we have and how we respond to this in the environment. And essentially, if you think of evolution as an outcome or a product, then you no longer have to think that there is an evolutionary force that is shaping where we go tomorrow.
So for many, many years, even after I was trying to apply evolutionary biology to medicine, I had this idea that evolution changes things. And finally, I grasped that mostly what natural selection does is keep things the same.
Yes, and that's the purifying selection. So purifying selection is a major force in natural selection, where things maintaining status quo is as important. And then as opportunities arise...
So what does purifying selection do? What's being purified?
So purifying selection is basically, if we have a suboptimal trait, we have a disadvantage. And if we have a disadvantage, then this individual may leave fewer offspring, and over time this trait will disappear. So
and genes for that trait.
Yeah, so genes for that trait will have a different impact.
They go away.
Yeah, so if we are carrying a mutation or DNA defect that actually has a negative impact on a person's health, then they would feel disease, and if the disease happens early enough in life, then it definitely will have an impact on ability to have children.
Now, every one of us has a bunch of new mutations that were not in our parents. How many? What's the newest estimates?
So the number of new mutation estimate depend on a number of factors. So essentially, sometimes in the case of our protein sequences, if you and I compare our proteins with each other, you will see approximately 5,000 differences at the level of the protein. And now these 5,000 differences have accumulated over the last 50,000 years.
So between any two individuals on the Earth, about an average of 5,000 protein differences.
Protein differences and million or more actual DNA differences, including non-protein coding regions. So we actually have a large amount of difference from each other, And actually, that is partly why we look different, partly why we behave different, in addition to nurture we have and natural world around us. But clearly, not all of them are acting on all the phenotypes we have, and a number of them are just neutral. They don't have a lot of effect on our fitness or ability to have children, and so those would be considered non-functioning mutations and could be considered neutral.
Good. Okay.